Greetings to everyone tuned into this channel on this fine day of the 5th of March, 2025. I am here to offer my irreverent self to your curious eyes. I always position myself as the journalist from the other shore prodding the establishment with a cynical gaze and occasionally a wry grin. You will find no shortage of brutally honest observations and cheeky remarks in my repertoire. Let us begin by welcoming you properly because that is the polite thing to do, so welcome indeed. Now, if you were expecting a pleasant chat about scones and jam, you may be disappointed. My style is to poke at the underbelly of the news like a mischievous child with a stick. Let us talk about Keir Starmer and his remarks at a Ramadan iftar in our dear Parliament. Many have cried outrage, but not for the reasons one might assume. He mentioned the suffering of Palestinians and the pain felt by British Muslims, and yet some were seething because they felt that the sorrow of Israelis was glossed over. The critics unleashed their fury on social platforms, demanding a balanced approach to the tragedy in Gaza, which has left everyone reeling from the horrors. I watched from my battered armchair sipping tea and thinking, this is quite the row we have here. People were pointing out that mention of October attacks and the resulting hostages and rocket fire was lacking in his words. Now, I do not pretend to speak for the entire British public, but I can sense that it is a precarious dance when a politician tries to offer empathy to both sides. If you fail to mention each and every aspect with equal fervor, you open the floodgates of displeasure. Of course, Keir Starmer tried to praise the contributions of British Muslims to business, education, the NHS and charitable endeavours, but the crowd latched onto the perceived imbalance. Outrage brewed faster than a pot of builder's tea left on high heat. Social media turned into a coliseum of heated condemnation. Some individuals used words like reprehensible, whilst others simply rolled their eyes at what they saw as shallow pandering. As the irreverent journalist I found the spectacle both riveting and exasperating. On one hand, I appreciate a bit of drama to liven up the day, but on the other hand, I cannot help but feel that these controversies emerge because we demand an impossible level of rhetorical perfection from our public figures. If they do not simultaneously acknowledge every angle of a crisis, we brand them hypocrites. One cannot simply talk about the conflict in Gaza without also addressing Israelis living in constant fear of rocket attacks, or so the outraged crowd believes. Let us continue this exploration by delving into the reaction some netizens shared. One commented that the world has gone mad, while another swore they had never despised a politician more. I found myself cackling softly at how quickly public sentiment can shift like a British weather forecast in spring. One moment mild and breezy, the next a full-blown storm of indignation, but enough about that. Let us pivot to a story that took a dark turn of its own. A certain Richard Jones was recently sentenced to a minimum of 20 years in prison for murdering his son's girlfriend Sophie Evans. A most grim affair and not for the faint of heart. He believed she was attempting to con him out of some financial business, so he paid her a visit and ended her life in the most brutal manner possible. He even went so far as to calmly procure a custard slice and a sandwich afterward, as though he had just finished a mundane chore. That level of coldness is enough to make me shudder even as I sip the last drops of my afternoon brew. The court heard that the poor victim had only just showered before Jones ended her life in such a cruel fashion. He even boasted to his ex-partner that he had erased the problem. The jury naturally saw through his attempts to claim diminished responsibility and found him guilty of murder. The judge reminded everyone that once the rage set in, he took his time to unleash unspeakable violence. The entire community was left aghast, pondering how such darkness could lurk behind the facade of normal life. As if we needed more evidence of how complicated our society can be, we now turn to the curious case of a migrant couple from El Salvador. They were granted permission to remain in the United Kingdom because a tribunal ruled that if forced to return to their country, they would face gang violence that would disrupt their relationship beyond repair. They do not speak English and they cannot work, so the government foots the bill. This decision has caused no small amount of grumbling among taxpayers, who feel that the system is taken advantage of by cases like these. The couple arrived in 2020 and were refused asylum initially, but eventually the man appealed and was granted refugee status thanks to fears of persecution by vicious gangs. The woman then argued under Article 8 of the European Convention on Human Rights that sending her back would shatter their family life. The tribunal concurred, so here they remain supported by the public purse. Some might say good on them for securing safety, whilst others lament that the law is being stretched too thin. Chris Philp had plenty to say about it, criticizing the extension of family rights to a non-married partner. I am always perched at the edge of the mainstream with my quill ready to puncture the most pristine balloons of self-righteousness. I see a pattern in these events that revolve around the tension between empathy and the harsh realities of policy. Keir Starmer tries to be charitable yet draws ire for not addressing Israeli suffering thoroughly. A father murders his son's partner over a perceived financial trick, leaving an entire community in shock. 2 asylum seekers remain in Britain because returning home is considered too dangerous. One might call it a tapestry of controversy weaved with threads of politics, law, empathy, and outrage. As the irreverent journalist on the other shore, I merely document these ironies with a twinkle in my eye and a readiness to upset the status quo. After all, it would not be a proper British day without a bit of chaos to stir the teacup. I trust you have enjoyed this peculiar journey through the recent goings-on in our fair land. I assure you there is much more to uncover, and I intend to remain that persistent thorn in the side of conventional narratives. So raise your teacup if you please and prepare for the next barrage of scandal, because in this realm the pot never stops boiling. Yes, that is right, dear viewer, I will remain ever so defiant, ever so contrary. Count on me to stir trouble and sip tea alike. I sometimes wonder if our dear nation is simply addicted to controversy. We open our eyes to find politicians offending one group or another. We peek out the window and discover a ghastly murder that defies reason. We look to our immigration courts and learn that rights are stretched to such an extent that many wave their arms in protest, yet here we remain clutching our cups of tea and trading wry remarks about it all. That is the British way in all its splendid chaos. If you fancy a brew, then keep your eyes on this channel for more tales of curious escapades. I promise there will be no shortage of chatter from this irreverent soul. Let us be honest, dear viewer, we would be bored senseless without the constant swirl of drama that bubbles up each morning. With that in mind, I invite you to stay tuned and remember that I stand ever ready to pick apart the narratives and raise a quizzical brow at every turn. This is what it means to be on the other shore, always questioning, always probing.